Okay. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, my voice is loud enough. Welcome to today's episode. The title is pretty clear. The title is The Body Inside the Mind Inside the Body. And I want to focus on how, in nature, if there has come the opportunity and the possibility of an individual, of a singular dimension based experience, I kind of noticed in some nature could have the potential to have the other side. And the fact that we as human beings want to engage the meaning of truth through certain words, pretty much we want to put the world into, we want to match the world with the words behind our eyes. Unconditional evocation. I can just in an instant imagine a glass of water. Do you know? And so throughout the years that I've been giving these, actually since, I started these talks in 2014, but in 2011, I had an experience which made me sensitive that experience is the sum for conceptual existence. That means I realized that underneath every thought that I have ever had, there is the presence of an essence of itself somehow. The title that I chose for this talk, I consider the title to be, it's artful as the other titles, but I find it's important. Because really, the title represents in a dream. My dream life has had an influence on me, but its influence per se, just the content of the dream. I remember in a dream, I was running. While I was running, I had control in the dream. The dream had a totally different landscape. In the dream, I could move left, I could move right. I woke up from the dream surprised that my physical body has been inactive, but my mind created a body. It was the simulation of not just the world, but a self that could move in the world. Even though my body was asleep on the bed in the dream state, there was the conscious and movement of a body in a world. So when I say the body inside the mind, inside the body, kind of like the body you have in your dream and the body you have outside. And because we as human beings in the mainstream consider be within the body due to the emergence of what I have realized is that in my youth, I was conditioned into perceiving a world where I felt most of human beings are given a definition of truth. They think it's something to get, something to take, something to have, something to find. And throughout this game of a sort of psychological character in a world kind of dualism and simulation, we become insensitive to how all of here. It was, I guess, in 2015 where I noticed a new relationship the human being can have with its ecosystem. I was convinced I was a particle in a field, and the intelligence from the particular way the biological existence was. I was convinced My body was an open book. In other words, I felt I don't want to say just the body. I mean, no, I think every human being must have a sense of unknown. That means if you, as a human being, have decided, it means you have not been in a total moment of certainty. Of course, it's an oscillation between certainty and uncertainty. So when I'm speaking about my past, I'm be speaking about reflections of moments. So keep that in mind. It is. It's like the movie Enemy at the Gates. It showed the Russian soldiers going into the battlefield. Some of them are given bullets, some of them are given guns, and they're told to run in the battlefield and they can't run back. Existence, I don't want to make it seem like a war, but I don't a physical war. I feel the era like physical wars are so lame. They're so not necessary anymore. It's more about the intellectual position of the. Welcome guys to the chat section. You're thinking, um, see guys, the way I approach these talks is that I see a title. The title for me is an image, and then when I give the talk, I perceive this image, and hence rhythms flow of kind of contemplation of it. What really is about William is I became attentive that in my dream state I have a body, and the body I have in state is the mind creating the body. So when I'm having a dream and in that dream I'm aware and I can move, my physical body is. That means the brain, sure, it can become inactive, but when we consider what the mind is, the brain is a lens for how the unknown gets to know things. So really, my fascination is that we have been experiencing, or let me say it, the human experiences, human progressing in a way where we're like body first, then whatever, then whatever, then whatever, if it's mind, soul, whatever you like to call it, mystery, unknown. But it's like first we stabilized a sense of what we know. And then from that knowledge, we know of what we know, and we come to the unknown. So these talks that I'm sharing, you'll, I think, being hopefully people will kind of get it because how can I tell you? It's like there is glory, divine glory, in living in and living in the truth. Both are needed. We have this impression that everything has to be in a certain way, and that's our agreement. What that means is the complex challenge. That means if somebody came up to you and it's like, hey man, let's say the next great Rubik's Cube for our human species is a puzzle of the centuries of how an advanced civilization can emerge. And really, what it is you got to take a good look at it first. Many of my personal beliefs that kind of my emotional experiences in life were kind of went through the sieve of direct perception. That means I can't tell much. I've had an opinion on something and then I've just stopped and looked at it one more time as if it's the first time I'm looking at it and then noticed something that I had before. On some level, as long as the energy of the body allows, the mind can infinitely extract conception. Cool thing is the species is, especially after 2020, this is something you can say you heard from Mr. Within, that we are becoming sensitive to new ways of living, and these new have a tolerance for multidimensionality. When you go back in history, they did not have a tolerance. The same, it's as if like, this is something a lot of, it doesn't get a lot of stage time, but I'll tell you this. Imagine back in the day, the spiritual person goes is the soul. You can go and ask this from any religious group. Now, in monotheism, it's a secret. It's the will of God. It's like asking what's moving the hand of. So the answer is given that it's a secret, it's unknown. Words, it is unfathomable, it is inconceivable. So when the spiritual person went and asked the tried put on the monotheistic glasses, the person saw that the concept of the soul was in some sense or forbidden. You go ask the secular person, the person who had no sort of extraordinary, and the person said there is nothing as soul. It's just what you see here, these atoms, buddy, nothing else. And this person who was wondering about greater dimensions went to the religion. So both the religion and science, and of course these are very general terms. I'm saying science is a method, religion is a sort of architectured belief system. It has architecture, by the way. So the moment a person says something is man-made, everything is. You see, it's like when man's mind looks at something, man-made. You know. But when you wonder with the concept that man uses for him, it means the concept of man is also man-made, which makes all the fundamental position of the language void. So you can't deny something without realizing in that moment you're also denying how your mind is being. Anytime a human being is violent or anything, it doesn't matter if you're drinking a cup of tea, it doesn't matter if you're in a and you've lost your weapon and you have to punch the opponents. It doesn't matter if you're a pilot that it has to navigate, has to kind of like, you know, pilot a plane safely, you'll see whatever it is. Ultimately, if the human being considers that what I do to I'm also doing to my mind that is being the world, karma will vanish. The concept of we will graduate beyond real, because the center of the wheel of karma doesn't move. The moment you take a side of a dualistic, you are pulled into a karmic wheel, a karmic spiral. You can kind of say ideology is like these whirlpools. And if the person really suddenly the person thinks one night, oh man, I'm such a bad person, or the person suddenly thinks, oh man, I'm such a good person, the moment you changing world put a mask on your face that you won't are not allowing to change, nature will change it. So the moment it's like when the inner realities want the outer realities to listen, the outer realities won't 100% perfectly listen, so there will be karma till the end of time. So what happens is we become conscious of our inner realms, our outer realms, and also realize, okay, middle of nowhere, unknown setting. The knowledge must be given flexibility to change. And what changes your knowledge is experience. And what is experience? It is the return to the unknown. I found something strange, guys. Something baffled me. When I was very young, I was in 0.1% distrust in the moment. My whole intelligence would lock down as if I had decided I don't care about this moment. Silence can be a room for me. Mind would sit in silence like a room, and I've sat in that room for so long in this life, in my youth especially. And let me tell you what I noticed. Existence validates itself by copying its pattern. There is a part of our psychology that cannot conceive death. Imagine a part of your brain hemisphere, and literally, of course, speaking about the brain as in two different hemispheres can be, of course, inaccurate because it's one general, one brain. But I'm saying is that we have kind of articulated, you know, through the efforts of various scientists and psychologists that, for example, the left hemisphere is more guided towards. In my youth, I was shy. I I was not only shy, like think of the shyness being one thing. I was also in a theocratical environment, which kind of developed a very kind of gentle inner nature, but a very restricted outer nature. The past that can have with the future is to plant seeds. Plant the seeds of a greater civilization, to find a value. It's like the thing times it's as if people say something, you get shocked. Sometimes the person can see something about the world and get shocked. I wondered about my own shyness and then realized my ancestors. Like I remember even kind of being stressed out, and then I laughed at my own weakness. That's a good thing, by the way. When you can laugh at your strengths, you can laugh at your weaknesses. I'm telling you, because the playfulness is a byproduct of a byproduct. And yay, the creature is good. That is too artificial. It's as if we shouldn't act artificially intelligent. We've made artificial intelligence. And that's the thing. That's the thing. It's an evolutionary return nature from an ideological, individualized, objective, conscious position to a collective, unconscious, beyond subjective, even uh, position. So, guys, what I was pretty much saying is that I was a shy kid. I realized my ancestors' time for shyness, stress, and all these modern day problems simply because they had to grab swords and run to defend their villages from conquerors or something. So reality, I noticed, started from a savage place, and then all my suffering suddenly wasn't suffering, it was a luxury. When you kind of read history, you're like, oh my, people back in the day didn't have toilets. People back in the day didn't have stores to go buy stuff from. Really, can you imagine the guy waking up in the afternoon and he's like, oh man, I got maybe like some time before it gets dark and I gotta go kill a buffalo. Concentration and to have something to eat. so so when you kind of look hard life was, you feel you have it easy, so the mind becomes kind of, it flows. So this is my kind of, you can go look at any moment in history and you the moment of history which will counter your archetypes, freedom. So if the person doesn't feel free, they can go find uh not only, how can I tell you, it's not that history repeats itself and sees patterns and things. History, believe it or not, just look at the word, his story, history, his story. What does that mean? It's the story, it's the communication ability of the human being. The fact that back in the day people cared to write stuff down to pass on to the next generation blows my mind. You know, makes me feel like as if the vision of my ancestors had a component that is still here, whether I want it or not. Vision of continuity. So I feel we are too much in on the surface of the, you know. So what that means is if you saw culture or just human intelligence up to 2020, it would be a sphere which we are on the verge. We were inside the sphere, now we're coming out of the sphere, you know. For me, evolution is a sort of observance from the center of a sphere, and you suddenly come outside of that sphere. I recognized in every moment of my life where I had made it be something or value something in a certain way, I noticed that space, that moment's space where I made the decision was the same space where I could have made any other decision. I saw the opportunity cost of my free will. When I saw the opportunity cost of my free will, it was a moment where I had to put down my luggage of language. This story of myself that I had been carrying, this kind of in with the ink of thought diary behind my eyes that would I would constantly read to myself. I had to burn that inner book. I had to let go of something I had noticed was inefficient. And the moment you notice something's inefficiency, trust me, when you're totally. Because our intelligence, something that has never happened, like check it out. We were in the food, we were creatures living in the with the ecosystem. You can say the ecosystem was in some sense the prototype generation of the human being before it left the kind of food chain, left the jungle and came to the city. When it came to the city, what happened? What transformed? Not only the creature began acknowledging itself as a self, but it began acknowledging a world and a world it can even build. And so, to be honest, the birth of progress was the awareness of an initial objective self. Objective self, after a certain fruition of objective evolution, like a metamorphosis, turned into the subjective. That means that many people talk about an objective evolution, but I'm telling you there's a subjective evolution. And they don't teach this in school. And the reason they don't teach it is because it surpasses language. And if the educational system comes and says there's something more than language, it would in some sense have to say that everything we are sharing can potentially be hollow. Now, I'm not this way. If you're a human being, you care for the continuity of your civilization, and your organization comes across to you as a physical, like as a body, let's say, how would you want the mind of your civilization to continue? That question of what kind of minds will emerge, we don't have choice over the free will of the human born in the future, but we have choice in what environments they're born in. That means the man's greatest ability is to transform the environment. And back in the day, I don't know what it was, like this Italian family, the Medici something. I saw it in a documentary. Pretty much it was in the bankers with questionable motives, but like these bankers on the window. Steve Nash. Notice that in the dream we moved. Now that we've woken up, let's say we wonder, okay, that means my mind, that means to distinguish what is truly physical and non-physical. And the only thing that makes a person conscious in his dream feel like that in the conscious waking state. Okay, let me say it like this. Like imagine you inside the you sense of you that you see inside a dream, and a sense of you that is awake in the morning, right? Difference between that sense of self in the dream and the sense of self, both had worlds, both had a sort of reality kind of shape to their world. But we see the objective, the waking state, because there is pain, because there is a sort of feedback, instant feedback, we call it objective. That means zeros, you want 1% chance that we are not just this. That we thought the world was not intelligent, and we realized the other way around. This world is alive, and our mind put that life there. The most valuable resource is the human mind. That's why I say our civilized advance. It hasn't noticed. It hasn't realized that it's not just a condition of overpopulation. We are being overpopulated by minds that can be the next Einsteins in the future. So what I'm saying is the civilization from the potential of the species. That means we have an ability to do something fascinating, yet externally it's not there yet. You see, I remember seeing this thing where somebody said it's like one third of your life journeying to places, with others or alone, whatever. And then a third of it, it's your conscious waking life and you live it in your free will. And that's where you're hearing me right now, unless you're walking. So that's what I'm saying. It's like it's an energetic opportunity for the moment to animate in an advanced way. And this was a way I kind of handled failure in my own reality. That means there's been, of course, many moments where I've been set back, where I feel like it took me a while to climb a mountain, and then I suddenly fell. And the only way I realized it, guys, was an ingenious pattern I saw. I saw that whenever I want something, when I was younger, I noticed when I want something, it's like when you run after it, it goes. They say when you chase the butterfly, you're a step behind. It's like that step behind is a failure. So I was kind of thinking, what sort of mind can potentially instantaneously bring the success? Not even instantaneously bring the success, but what's this solution to this step behind of the desire of the person, or not just the desire, the want of the person, what the person's attention is going towards? I notice you got to think two steps ahead. That's just that I've seen validity in my own experience I'm sharing. To be honest, I'm just some guy talking about stuff in a billion trillion stars. Vision, attention, awareness. These are the elements of the soul. They are like the faces, the kind of like in Vedic culture, they had gods with multiple faces, which means the god was present in multiple. So you can say that your attention now as a human being is like your sight is a tunnel for experience. Oh, guys, is this being cut off? I mean, sometimes I do press mute and just I need to quick like, okay, I don't know. Hopefully it's being recorded. What can you do? The opportunity the moment grants. For me, when language, ideology, knowledge is weather, I was able to move through any subjective environment. That means there was a time where this may sound hilarious, but I said I was fighting language. I was fighting ideology behind my eyes. And what that meant is I was trying to, and I was drawn to many directions in this life. But I found that path to be. I found that path to literally, those those kind of like where it's like It's like a full circle and the car goes from one side and comes down the other. I found it to be psych. I found my search for truth to be seasonal. What I mean is, listen, in this world, there's two options as an existential being. You either trust existence or you don't. If you don't trust it, most likely you won't pay attention to it. But if you trust it, you will. What's our eyes doing it? And of course, it's like on some level, ants thinking we're gods. But like, yes, you think that yes, guys, was sometimes I respond to the chat say. So you think, yeah, it's what's more important is humility and that authentic the yogis would speak about. Do you know it has nothing to do with image? I don't want to say nothing to do with image. It changes its potential, kinetic, temporary, non-temporary. It is to welcome life. That's something that took me a while. When you The only reason I feel the species is so intelligent that the moment it becomes aware of its subjective realms, it'll realize how violence is unnecessary. The fact that we think what the only thing is where the kind of um, illusion begins kind of tapping karmas back to kind of, I find we are a multidimensional species. I mean, what is language? Go look at the dictionary. It's like so many words that don't have just one meaning. They have multiple meanings. So if we can see one word having multiple meanings, it's very hard to see a human being dimensions and to consider the depth and the accessibility of these dimensions. So what's missing from the educational system is an authentic inspiration for children born to be like, oh my God, where am I? And like go and explore. It's vision. It's like when you realize even okay, let's say it doesn't matter. Let's say there was an atheist and theist in the room. It's like both outcomes. You are in the battlefield or in the playground or whatever you like to see. You are in the grand play of life. Now, what are the objectives? One, you can say continuity in existence. So you got to attend to your own existence. That's something every person has to develop their own style. But when it comes to what else do you do in an empty room, you search until you see, okay, whatever, it's empty, completely empty. And then you realize when emptiness comes, novelty comes after. Emptiness is the darkness where the bird of consciousness finds itself. So my mentality changed from having a complex plan on life to kind of realizing it's a play. It's not scripted. That's the cool thing about it. It's like you're in a theater performance. Imagine somebody has given you a billion spiritual dollars. And so you have taken this billion spiritual dollars and you have now become an actor in a or in the play called Earth. And this play by Earth wasn't written by Shakespeare, but Shakespeare seemed to know who it was written by. So that's the thing. It's the reawakening of novelty. It is the defending of novelty. That means the task of the young generations is to bow at their ancestors, but say, watch this, and then reinvent the modern world. To be able to multidimensionally acknowledge things, it's an ability. It's the most beautiful ability. It's really why you have a mind. It's like, what's the mind here for? Multidimensional perception. All right. The ultimate realization, I think, is that energy is being conscious of itself instantaneously. Because it's instantaneous, it will forever be attributed to the dualistic dimensions. I found through giving these talks, eventually I kind of came up with a model of like if somebody asked me, all right, how would you explain the dimensions of this plane of existence? You know, oh pilot, how would you fly in this place? I would say, and when I say pilot, guys, I'm using pilot as a metaphysical metaphor for try to imagine what honoring your mind would be like what kind of personality you as a human being would have if your every thought you had, every it's as experience of life occurred with uh, your own, how can I say it, with the rhythm. There is a joy in that. There is a joy in simplicity when complexity seems to have endless problems. The pilot must navigate between the simple and complex, between the known and the unknown. And my model of how this world is multidimensional, and hopefully I will do it justice, very vast idea. I've talked about it in different ways, but I can say 0, 1, 2, infinity. Symbols 0, 1, 2, infinity. I decided to attempt to explain all conception, the whole linguistics, the whole linguistic simulation um, through mathematical language. That means 0, 2, the number 2, and the symbol infinity, everyone can pretty much acknowledge worldwide. So what does this mean? This, your eyes have opened as an attention, as an experiential kind of phenomena in the moment. And so the first dimension they require to acknowledge is the 0 dimension. What does that mean? That means there is they acknowledge the space where things are instantly being before action occurs. This may be a kind of, but guys, I felt like sharing this, that I feel my physical existence is a microphone. And in my conscious waking state, this microphone miraculously is present to itself. We acknowledge the void, and from the void arose the singular. The singular is the ability of the human being to get everything in life and be able to see all of it as one moment, as having a single thing. Even the ability to see objects to be separate from one another. The way I'm saying it is very crucial to be aware of the one dimension. So we went to the 0 dimension, you acknowledge the void, the space that is required. It's like we're acknowledging the room that we're in, before what we do in the room. So once you're comfortable and content with space, with absence, with emptiness, then you will automatically find you are endlessly content with any sort of singular phenomena. So suddenly you see anything can be, it doesn't matter if a person in the other part of the world becomes great, or a person beside your house becomes great. It's as if like you can acknowledge singular values. You can acknowledge how every human being has a universe that they have been living and striving and surviving in. And this is why sometimes violence breaks my heart, you know because it disturbs the advancement of our species. Things come and go is very crucial. So after language, that means language came out of an The dualistic dimension is really how chaos and order are the wings plane that the pilot finds navigating. The pilot metaphor is so perfect that it even keeps traditional spirits alive. The pilot is not defined by the plane of existence, it navigates it. A pilot tends to have to a sort of headquarters. And the pilot is not alone, but finds himself in a situation responsible for his or her whole existence. What does that mean? That means you as a human being, ever since we stepped out of the jungle, it has become responsibility to not just handle the environment, not to just interpret it, but to keep alive the environment. What was nature's responsibility has now become man's free will. Ultimately, any attempt of communication is an effort to share an inner vision or externalize it. And the accuracy of people's inner visions, it's like the whole the attitude towards thoughts having to be truth must change. Having a belief is like subconscious language worship. And hence, the true act of worship is an emotional relationship with the cosmos. That means your emotional relationship has to do with your composure, but your knowledge has to do with your awareness. You see, it's like the human being has different dimensions that they can master. Now, the concept, it is not something to have, because the master doesn't think of himself as a master, because the mastery at some point requires to be infinite. In order to attain that perfection, it cannot not be in, like the master eventually reaches an archetypal position. Really, what do we have? We have physical bodies and we have an ability to communicate and observe. So pretty much physical movement. These are our abilities. Even dreaming, but I'll bring that in other talk. Say for now these two abilities. You can communicate and, in other words, articulate, and you as a human being can physically move. The thing is, human beings all around the world are trying to figure out what is the best sequence of movement throughout the day. That before I do anything, I look at the mountain I have to climb. I just look at the mountain. It doesn't matter how high it is. It doesn't matter if it's possible. I just first look to see what's there. Then I allow the subjective realms to land and kind of do their interpretation. So you think I'm seeing your comment interesting too. I do not disagree with your viewpoint, but I have to say that the whole conception of language is arbitrary. It is mass groups behave in a certain way that behavior eventually becomes even the language. So we have to even realize before nations were nations, before nationalism, the people around caveman making a savage noise to another caveman. Do you know? And this has been throughout time. This effort to share the inner with the outer. It has been crystallized. What that means is the caveman would, ugh. But we as human beings sing poetry as if infinity is in the palm of our hand and eternity is in an hour or something. So you see that the ability of the human being has shifted in regards to its sophistication of acknowledgement of its setting. So truth. If I ask you what are words, what would you say? You think? By the way, I'm responding to the chat section here. What are words? So the thing is, hold on mute. Okay. The thing is, so you think in the comment section, I will tell you, it's like language ultimately effort of man to, through a unique symbolic attribution and remembrance of that symbolic attribution, continue an image. I'm saying within every word, there is the stars. The stars, deep down, what is behind that word or concept is an experience. That means any concept that some human being on the planet experienced something and that concept emerged. So it has to do with the faculty of how experience embraces existence. So I feel words are actually the effect of images. And images we can't really judge. Can you judge a color? Can you like judge, I don't know, a blue sky? You see, you can't judge things that require to be the basic building blocks. You can't, most people don't, like, you don't have an opinion even. You're just there. It's people like Alan Watts, Terence McKenna, Isaac Asimov. These human beings were not afraid of their imagination. They were not afraid of the unknown. They found it to be a source of fascination that the person, it doesn't have to live in type. You don't have to inhabit, you don't have to go live in one thought structure for the rest of your life. The point of the mind is it's like nature is this evolved. So on some level, true independence arises when you realize consciousness is like a candle, like as the biological existence, and where are you on a rock in the middle of nowhere? So to be honest, for me, there's a surreal aspect to the design of nature that is chaotic. For me, it's chaotic. That means it's as if like it's neither heaven, it's neither hell, it's somewhere strange. So for me, it's as if the earth told to children in bedtime story, eventually they're going to see deeper faces of it. It's like just like how a person befriends someone and even with one's kind of spouse, it's a sort of kind of two minds that are constantly seeing deeper dimensions of one another. And because we're evolutionary beings, it doesn't matter if the person goes and sees a bunch of minds or the person gets to know a mind for a long time, you know? Marriage is not a union of hearts, all it's just it's a union of minds. It means that the realms of your experience and how phenomena are going to occur in the same moment as another, you know. This is something crazy that in psychology, in a psychological, in a psychology article, there was the suggestion that couples who've been with each other for a long time, like spouses or partners who've been with each other for a long time, they develop a sort of codependent memory where it's as if they begin kind of remembering each other. It's as if becomes two minds helping to, there's something cool. It's like people thought walls were only to kind of block things. Sometimes it's as if anytime you want to add something dimensions, there's strangely a kind of, I could say, a divide and strategy of philosophy where it begins to acknowledge both sides of the spectrum, evoking a new dimension. So sometimes I sit down and I just, my eyes are closed and I kneel my back against something comfortable, and I just for a moment just wonder in my mind, if I have a desire, I just close my eyes and wonder what that desire is. And I look at thoughts. It's not about being happy 24/7. It's not about escaping reality into an inner heaven 24/7. It is about the value of, and it becomes codependent, but it becomes like your known self in a symbiosis with your unknown self. Now, that unknown self, many people gave it different symbols, you know? And it is fair to say, being due to their limited sensory range of perception in their narrative of who they were behind their eyes, it was as if there was an unknown thing they couldn't see further. And of objects. So we realized we're not objects, but we were aware of them, so we could use objects efficiently. Thought we were subjects, and we were like, whoa, we're not subjects. And so what happens is we observe the subjects and use the subjects efficiently. When you realize you're not a thought, you will have a sort of internal relaxation through communication. If you think something in a certain way in a universe that is changing, that means, to be honest, it's as if nature is something that even if the person doesn't think, it's still going forth. And the cool thing about civilization is that everything in nature has been just progression. Progress has always happened. I mean, how did evolution get here after 4 billion years? So progress is happening. But the fact is that we as humans, playing, what do you call it? Like throwing a baseball at his son and his son throwing the baseball back. And it's like the father, as important as the birds and the bees kind of conversation. The father, you're not just everything I've told you and everything society's told you. You're a human being that you can potentially be seeing something that none of us see. A sort of unconditional vision. Everything we see in front of our eyes has conditions. That means I found it fascinating. This is how playful, I don't want to say playful, but how mysterious. Okay, that's too much. Like, I'll say, like, this is how unknown our minds are. That right now I can visualize, for example, I'm visualizing right in front of me, let's say, let's a cube, a blue cube, a blue glowing cube. So I can imagine this blue glowing cube spinning at a very slow speed, rotating around itself at a slow speed. I can imagine this glowing cube hovering in the air, rotating around itself in a slow. Talking to you, I can still see that there. I can see that glowing thing. So that's what was that? That was visualization. What is visualization? The attempt of subjective giving direction to subjective. This concept of a painter is a very profound thing, because really, what else can you do with an empty canvas? I mean, it's like at some point, meaning can't be tamed, which is a cool concept because it means there's a wilderness it's like we as human beings externally are very civil, but internally there can be wilderness. And how must this wilderness be conducted? I feel an advanced civilization must have not only advanced external technologies, relationship with the unknown will of the laws of nature. You're free to see it as God's will, or you're free to laws of science. You can see it as a sort of certain forces acting irrelevant to any sort of animate personality. That means there is a purity to science which it's kind of strange to explain. It's a purity of intention in science. I think the intention of the scientific method is pure. Anyways, inner technologies, external tech, the user of the technology becomes aware, the technology advances. At some point, we have to decide about the process of the independence of our own created technologies with ourselves. We have to eventually, hopefully there will be philosophers who will begin wondering what it would mean to have a sort of cyberspace update to the structure of civilization. And when I say deep, or let me say intimate, I'm talking about an idea of connecting brains to computers. I feel we have to, as a civilization, be aware of this. It's like I see the whole species and the civilization to be a giant boat. I see pretty much 8 billion people on a giant boat. And some parts of this holes in it. Some people are running towards it, some people are not. Some people are like, the boat's always been here and it's going to always be here. But the boat seems. So I was thinking, if we were in heaven right now, it would kind of be like the next action. It's as if is heaven a place where the person uh, can do nothing else? Is heaven the completion of the game of life? Or is heaven a state where eternity was always eternity, so the temporary becomes an opportunity? Anyways, guys, life is as beautiful as our eyes are open to it. It's funny, it's like the more I felt I knew myself, the more time passes on, I constantly see that every new was prone to change. And there's something very beautiful about witnessing endless change. It's like there's no aroma to it. And to position image by the nature of how your intelligence projects thoughts is very different than the child feeling that language should dictate it. I mean, of course, something where you can always update the sophistication of it. It's like Salvador Dali says, don't fear perfection, you'll never reach it, you know? That means the pride behind the shield of judgment is an to seek perfection in a dynamic system is like seeking the edge of eternity. Really, the world will, I find, this is the way it happens. The person becomes unsatisfied. Then they look at their moment and then they realize their satisfaction has to be a drop of water in a river. When your eyes become important for you, when your sight becomes wondrous for you, then you will care about what's inside. There is something beautiful about the inner realms. There's our species has not realized how advanced our minds are. Our ancestors couldn't. The only thing they could do is just shout their dreams at us. And in 2020, the civilization, every single part of it must be great. That greatness be, it would be the greatness of whoever in that moment in history is there to attend to it. That thing of entering a collective system is that the rights of others not only become your right, but your right also becomes the rights of others. That human beings care about your inner realms, as much as you care for the inner realms of others. Because at the end of the day, it's our species. I mean, it's like why I didn't I didn't choose the design of nature, but the way it seems to be is that it has classes by nature. That means sometimes when I see human beings discussing the patriarchy on TV, I'm like, what is this? Have we stopped staring at? Have we stopped realizing that there were many class distinctions in nature, and our civilization developed to a sort of direction, hunter-gatherer society. Therefore, we united. We had, for the first time, the emergence of a collective identity. That's what a tribe was. Collective identity emerged, suddenly every person's value became together. It was like a bunch of raindrops on a windshield merging. That's what it was. But as the tribe got bigger and as luxuries increased, there were less reasons to be humble. Life became less intense. It became easier for the inner realms to be more cruel. This is why, for example, tells jokes on a battlefield. And if they do, they must be enlightened. The concept of alchemy back in the day was the transformation of lead into gold. And the way lead to gold was a process of the purification of a total transformation, right? So this metaphor of turning lead to gold was a chemical was an alchemical metaphor for the evolution of the soul into the inconceivable purity, into the will of the inconceivable purity. That will of the inconceivable purity is a return contentment of space. So imagine somehow, of course, I'm saying this respectfully and for the sake of the, but imagine the person experienced heaven and was standing in heaven, and the person's like, all right, I don't even know what time is it. I exist forever in this way. The person will eventually wonder what happened to evolution. Evolution seemed to be going upwards. It seemed to be going from one level to another, to another, to another. How is it that I suddenly came to one sort of simulation of reality, and that became the eternal abode of presence? So the person sees that really it's a responsibility to stand as the space of the world. That means this is a strange concept, but I think those who are mystics by nature would comprehend that space is something space. That means when you even go into a room, when you go into the presence of every moment of your life, you're in the presence of the living world. You, in some sense, are the presence of the living world. But I'm saying, like, when you treat the world as if it's standing greater than you, then you begin standing greater in greater ways. That means in your mind, live like you're in Civilization 2.0, even though in front of your eyes you're seeing Civilization 1.0, because we need at least the inner, at least one part. Like if an advanced civilization equals inner realms and the outer realms both advanced, it would mean that at least the inner realm part we can do. It's instantaneous languages and evocational technology. So we can instantly update the user of technology, but we cannot, the technology, we have to wait for the external technology. So what happens when the person behind their eyes is living in an advanced civilization, which in front of their eyes hasn't happened? That's when natural movement uh, plays its part. So for me, it's like, especially even the kind of serenity that I found suddenly stressing through giving these talks was a witness of my own voice. And it's a strange thing to hear yourself. When you hear yourself, you realize everything you have ever said you have been hearing. So, in some sense, there's a simultaneously speech is occurring, which ultimately means it's as if the whole moment is you are your whole moment of being. Ultimately, the is your whole moment. What else can it be? So when the mind is being the moment, and the moment your moment is being your mind, it means wonder, wonder about how the stability of the of where your feet is. I think a relationship with a living universe is healthier. With an animate universe is healthier than an inanimate. This animate universe doesn't necessarily mean a personality, but a living